for me in my life and my entrepreneurial life and the lives of other entrepreneurs is they're just really curious, and that curiosity has no limits.
With you, how do you identify like what type of thing you want to try to create or solve?
What was that first project? And I guess how has that helped you continue to form these new companies that you continue to build?
Don't get too caught up in how tough it is, what you're facing right now. Push through it.
Yep.
Because you don't know what's on the other side of that. Some people call it a pivot, it's a restart. I call it survival. For those out there who are older entrepreneurs, I want to say to you, my last company I started when I was 60. The one before that I started when I was 55. So this one I'm starting at 66. So there's hope for all of you at an advanced stage to go out and start companies.
Welcome back, Discipline to Win, episode 48. Today we have Mark DeSantis in the studio with us. Mark is the CEO of Bloomfield Robotics, serial entrepreneur, adjunct professor, done a lot of different things in his life that we're excited to dive into today. Mark, thanks for coming to the studio with us.
I have to make one correction. Yes. I was, until recently, the CEO because we were acquired.
Okay.
So
no longer CEO.
Yeah, so we were acquired by Kubota Corporation, which is the third largest tractor manufacturer in the world, big industrial firm. So about a year ago, we were acquired, and then they kept me around as a consultant. Okay. And now it's an operating division of this giant Japanese industrial firm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We read a bunch into that. We're excited to dig into that later. But you know, before we really get too much into what's happened most recent.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of qualities of entrepreneurs that lead to all those different types of success. And I like to try to pinpoint, where did that start or where did that come from? Yeah. So if you could just sort of start at the beginning, of talking about just your life and what made you who you are before you really started your career.
Yeah, I was just telling one of my students yesterday about where does entrepreneurship come from, and this may sound a little strange, but I actually think it starts in childhood, and it starts with the events in your life when you're very young, I think, my theory, that stay with you even to the ripe old age of 66, where I am. It stays with you and somehow motivates you. And I think of the instance when I was very small, probably fifth grade, and we went on a field trip to a museum. Actually, I grew up north of Pittsburgh in Sharon, PA, and we came down to Pittsburgh to go to the Carnegie Museum, I think. And they had an exhibit of Leonardo da Vinci's inventions and all these models of all these things that he had invented and developed. And, and here I'm just a small child. I'm thinking, this guy developed all these things. He were hundreds of years ahead of their time. He was an artist. He was a sculptor, a scientist, an engineer. I thought, wow, that is amazing. And, my last name is DeSantis and his name is Da Vinci. And I'm half Italian, so maybe there's something anyway.
Yeah.
But that always stayed with me, and it, I think, guided my motivation throughout my life. And one of the several things is Da Vinci, if you know his life, and there's a great biography of him by Walter Isaacson, who wrote the biography of Steve Jobs and others. He basically said the guy was just curious. He was curious. I don't in any way suggest that I'm anywhere brilliant as he was, but I am like him, curious about a lot of different things. And I think that has guided my entrepreneurial venture. And if there is one quality, I think that that stands out for me in my life and my entrepreneurial life and the lives of other entrepreneurs, is they're just really curious, and that curiosity has no limits.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. They're curious about a lot of different things. And so if you look at my life up to now, it's taken me in a lot of different directions. And I've never let necessarily the world or what other people think I should be doing guide my thinking so much as my own curiosity.
I think that to have that sort of drive to invent something or try to discover something, Nick and I, all of our businesses that we've started are service-based. We've never done anything where like we're trying to create essentially something new, to where in our brains, it's always, we identify a problem and it's just like, well, we could definitely do it, either faster or, better or, take care of somebody even more. With you, how do you identify like what type of thing you want to try to create or solve or invent, if that's sort of been your lens and your path?
I actually, my approach has been, because I'm not a technologist, although all my businesses have been quote unquote tech businesses.
Yeah.
I'm not too different than you. I start with what service could be provided or is being provided, but could be enhanced significantly with the application of some technology that I have yet to discover.
Got it.
So my view of this was always to look at the problem and work back into the tech. To me, I mean, my last, I'm the CEO of a new AI company right now, and if I look back on the last three companies, they're AI. They use AI in some way. So, oh, you're into AI. No, I'm into technology that solves the problems I'm interested in, and it just so happens that AI is the best solution for that.
Makes sense.
So I'm not like some people. There are some tech entrepreneurs who they've developed a hammer, and they're going to find a nail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow, some way. My view is I just look at some nails and I ask myself, are there any golden hammers available? And if there aren't, can we build a golden hammer to hit that nail? And that's how I've done what I've done. So for me, I'm always stunned at what we're able to do technologically, but it doesn't in any way necessarily guide my thinking about what kind of solution. So you and I have a very similar. Every company that ultimately I started was a service.
Right.
It was just a service that was either designed to supplement an existing pretty human manual service, or replace it entirely, but do it in a way that greatly enhanced the performance of that service. That's it.
So starting from, like you said that there's been a handful of companies, starting from that first one, what exactly was that? And then I think something that we always wonder, because we're in kind of the first stage of our entrepreneurship career. This is we've had a couple of companies, but this is the first stage, and we hear from a lot of individuals like yourself who have been successful of the things that you learned throughout the different stages, where this is project 1, project 2, project 3, and so on. What was that first project? And I guess how has that helped you continue to form these new companies that you continue to build and whatnot?
I always think an entrepreneurial journey is like walking through a minefield. You can get through it, but you're going to get dinged.
For sure. For sure.
I mean, there's no way around that. Yeah, you're going to step on a mine and probably another and then another. Yeah. So a lot of my learnings, just to be clear to your listeners here, were around, well, let's not do that again. Yeah. So my first company was developed with a gentleman who was dropped out of his PhD program at Carnegie Mellon to co-found a company with me to help. We're talking 2007, 2006, 2007. You recall, we invaded Iraq and the soldiers were having a hell of a time in urban environments and surviving. And we had a friend who went through a door, and there was a bad guy on the other side of that door, and he didn't make it out. And we thought if we had a device that could have told our friend what was on the other side of that wall, he wouldn't have gone in there, or gone in there maybe with a grenade instead of walking in. And so we developed this small handheld device that packed with sensors. Sounds like James Bond here, but packed with sensors. And the soldier or SEAL operative would throw it in what the military calls a denied area, kind of a space either can't fit a human or it's maybe too dangerous. And then that thing would right itself and then sweep the room and say, hey, bad guy, T-74 tank, AK-47 or whatever. So we developed this using early machine learning and early AI. Sort of worked, kind of most of the time, sometimes. But we got a lot of military with money from the Navy, Marine Corps, three-letter agency, and some other folks. Develop. And when you sell to the military, we got one big challenge. It has to work every time, and it has to be rugged, and it has to be cheap, and it has to be light. And that takes a lot of money, more than a startup can support. And so we realized early on, after doing this for a few years and several $1 million, my co-founder and I realized we're not Lockheed Martin. We can't do this anymore. So we took the technology we had developed, kind of shifted it in a different direction to start another company.
Okay.
And that's, some people call it a pivot. It's a restart. I call it survival. Yeah. And they had to take a hit, as you know, in a situation like that where you're taking investment capital, you get more investment. Your slice of the pie shrinks, and so our slice shrunk pretty small.
Right.
But we were able to restart it in a completely different direction. Ultimately, it took a few years. It took a few years, like every entrepreneur. And it's not like I'm not holding this out as some requirement of entrepreneurship, but every entrepreneur goes through the valley of death. And so he and I probably for 2 years didn't pay ourselves, maybe longer, maybe 2.5. And as we went through a period of kind of reset, we had to lay everybody off. We hadn't paid our landlord in like 18 months. He kept coming. He was a great guy, still a friend. He used to come by and he'd walk in and say, "Hey guys, how's it going?" Which was code for, "Do you have any money at all?" And I remember at one point I had a $85,000 credit card bill and I hadn't paid myself in 2 years. And we got a dunning notice from one of our investors. We had an unconverted note, and that was a good day. So when you go through those periods, what's the great quote by Churchill? When you're going through hell, keep moving.
Yep.
And so we sort of pressed on, and then I vividly remember my co-founder and I. He was from India, and it was bad. And we were walking around the South Side, and I was of a mind to say, "Okay, Abby, we might have to declare bankruptcy." And frankly, we were so bad, we might have to declare personal bankruptcy. It was bad. And walking around the block, and I'm just basically going to talk to him about his ideas for winding this down. And to his credit, he's like, "I have an idea." I'm like, "All right." He's like, "We should take our machine learning and get into the utility markets. Power markets." Come again? I go, "How would that work?" He goes, "Well, we can use our machine learning. We can predict, my family in India is in the power industry." I wish he'd told me a little bit more about that, but they really did. But that's another story for another time. Power markets are the largest commodity market in the world. Is the power markets of North America, where power is bought and sold every day on these kind of virtual spot markets around the United States. Literally, power is bought and sold every day, and there's what's called a real-time price and a day-ahead price. The price of electricity today and the price of electricity tomorrow. People trade these things, mostly utilities and big industrial firms. And he's like, "We could use our machine learning to make some prediction, not precisely, but a little bit better prediction than what's available right now." Like, what? And I go, "Well, how would that work?" Humoring him. "Well, Mark, we'd certainly want to partner with somebody who's big in the power industry. I don't know, like General Electric. They produce 40 to 25% of all the generators in the world are built by GE. So let's partner with them." "Sure." Two broke guys and sales side. Let's call the largest industrial company in the world and say, "Hey, can we work together?" Another one was, "Well, who would our customers be?" And well, we'd have to get big industrials like big steel mills, maybe large chains like grocery store chains and such. Literally is what we're saying. Then and I said, but isn't it regulated? Yes, it's very regulated. We would need somebody who's got experience with the regulations, some expensive lawyer or some person from Washington maybe who could tell us how the utility markets work. Fine. Humoring him further, I said, so when would we just, well, let's do this now. Let's start now. Now, I'm the CEO, so I'm the one that should be more inspiring, but I wasn't. I was just so burned out. I was just like, I'm ready to call it quits. But something about the way he was saying it, I said, no, all right, let's try this. For any entrepreneur that's out there listening that's at death's door, I want you to hear this. 18 months later, thereabout, we had raised $10 million. Our biggest investor, well, actually it was more than that, it ended up being around 17 million. Our biggest investor was General Electric.
Wow.
Wow.
They put 11 million into our company. It's the only Pittsburgh company, when they had a venture fund, that they ever invested in. We had Alcoa, AK Steel, Safeway as customers. And to top it off, on our board, we had a guy named John Wellinghoff, who was the recently retired chairman of the FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the highest authority in the United States for the utility market. He was on our board.
It's crazy.
Within 18 months or so. I still look back on that experience as when you confront the challenges that you confront as an entrepreneur, don't get too caught up in how tough it is, what you're facing right now. Push through it.
Yep.
Because you don't know what's on the other side of that. And I still look at that and say, how in the world do we do that? Anyway, so from that, we built a company called Quantics, and eventually we ended up selling that, and it became a hedge fund. It still exists. So people can look it up. It's called KWANTIX LLC. I think it's in Texas now. I don't know. It was bought and sold. And then from that experience, ultimately, I was sort of kicking around looking for something to do, and then I met some folks at CMU, and there was a guy, a research professor at CMU, and so he said, hey, go talk to, actually it's kind of fun. If you go, so I've been teaching at CMU for 25 years, and there's what's called a tech transfer office, and there was a guy there that worked, and he's in charge of looking at all the tech in the university and trying to figure out ways to turn that into stuff. And he had what I call the toy catalog.
Okay.
So I'd say, show me what you got. So he gave me this paper, and it's got, well, Professor so-and-so is working on an anti-gravity machine, and somebody else is working on some who knows what death ray, and another guy's working on a robot killing machine or something. And he showed me this one thing, and he goes, hey, there's a guy that developed his technology to inspect road surfaces. So your Export, PA, or Pittsburgh, PA, or San Francisco, California, there's somebody that's dedicated to inspecting the asphalt on the streets. Believe it or not, some citizens may not agree with that belief. It's true.
Yeah.
They inspect road surfaces, and then that informs treatments of those road surfaces. Well, what if you could use, and the way it's done now is 3 or 4 guys get in a truck, hopefully drive around, look down at asphalt and say, oh, there's an alligator crack. Oh, there's a block crack. Oh, that's raveling. That's rutting. These are all terms that describe different features of asphalt and concrete. And then there's certain treatments are applied to those surfaces to remedy them so we don't see the road cancer that is potholes. Mm-hmm. Well, he had developed this way to use a cell phone and imaging to see that. So you put a cell phone in the windshield, drive, images everything. Then the AI isolates the road surface and then identifies about 40 features. So you can map your entire city down to the meter and tell the city, hey, fix this, change that, do this, do that, very efficiently. And it was a company called Robotics. And it took us several years. And then in 14 million, 13 million in venture capital, and we sold it to a company called Michelin, the great French Tire and
Yeah.
and Restaurant Review Company. Same one. People don't realize that.
People don't realize that.
Do you know why? You know why, right?
I've heard the story, but I can't remember it off the top of my head of how.
If you think of it, right, Sir Michelin, right, he developed some of the first tires for automobiles back in like 1905 or some damn thing. So he wanted to sell tires. So how do you sell more tires? You encourage people to drive.
Right.
And if they have places to go, they're going to drive more. So he developed a map of restaurants and places to go in France. And then he would go to these places, rate them, and then he would give these booklets out to people who bought his tires. So they would use tires.
Yes.
Yeah, that's clever.
Yeah.
So they kept it. They kept it, and it's still the same company. Very, very unusual. Anyway, so we sold that, and then there's a funny story. I was telling this to the robotics was kind of funny. Everywhere we went, we ended up being around 200 cities around the world. You know, a lot of small towns and big cities. And my favorite story is about Savannah, Georgia. Everywhere we went, we were in the local news, as you can imagine.
Yeah.
Politicians love this.
Yep.
You know, I'm fixing the roads. I'm here as mayor. We're going to have better roads. And everywhere we went, we were on the local news. It was like you were like this minor celebrity traveling around the world, getting all these local news stories. And I'll never forget, I went to Savannah, Georgia, and they invited me to present at the city council of Savannah, Georgia. And I'm like, all right. And so I walk in, and there's the entire city council and the mayor, and there's cameras, like news cameras, and they're going to see my presentation. I thought, how do I get myself involved in these things? Like, this is crazy. So I start presenting, and what we would present is a heat map. And they had a big screen. And it was a heat map where you would see red, yellow, green, every street, all, I think it was, I want to say it was like 400 or 500 miles, centerline miles of roads. So you see this map with red, green, yellows of streets. And there's one city councilman as I'm presenting, and I just see his body language. This guy is mad. I mean, he is furious. Something I'm saying is he is not liking it. And he's looking at me, and he's just drilling holes in me through his eyes. And he's looking at the mayor, and he's like ready to, I thought he was going to, you know, it was like one of those professional wrestling scenarios where he takes a chair and brings it over his head. Something's going on, and I don't know what's going on. And this head of public works, nice guy's looking at me as I'm presenting. He's like, you know, wrap it up, wrap it up. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So as I'm presenting, I look at the map, and I'm like, oh, every city councilman has a district that's just described, you know. And there was if you look at the map, there's a weird feature. There was a set of roads that sort of ended, and you could just draw a line where they ended, and it was all red, and then right where it ended, it would become green, and you could see the outlines of what looked like a square, because it was a sea of red, and then everything else was green, and a little yellow, and a little bit of red. And it was this guy's district. And he and the mayor, he ran against the mayor previously, and these two guys hated each other. And then they started yelling at each other in the meeting. So the cameras pretty much lost interest in me and started filming the two of them arguing. And I thought, look, we're just trying to do our job.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that left me with, you know, what am I going to do now? And so about 6 years ago, again, went back to the tech transfer office, and I said, hey, Reed, what do you got? So again, went through the list again. Literally, this is what happened. Oh, yeah, we got this guy's doing this. This guy's doing this. And there were two guys, Dr. George Cantor, who's a researcher there, and Tim Muller-Sim, who was one of his grad students in robotics. And these two guys had started a company that was still kind of in the lab, still under development as a technology that essentially inspected crops. So when I was a 10-year-old kid, you know, my Italian immigrant grandfather had a garden, and he would go around and, you know, and I'd follow him around. He'd inspect the tomatoes and peppers, and he was touching them and de-leafing them, and he would pour a little water on this and spray a little pesticide on that. And that process of inspection of somebody looking at the plants takes place on an industrial scale when you look at fruits and vegetables that you buy in Whole Foods or Safeway or Giant Eagle. And what if you could automate that? So like what we were saying earlier about a service, it's a manual service, just like road inspection.
Yeah.
There's some dude in a vineyard in France who's walking down the lane and looking at the vines and the grapes, and you imagine how limited that is, right? If you've got 50 acres, that's fine. But if you've got 50,000 acres, it's just not going to work. Yep. So what if you could take a camera, custom built to inspect plants, hang it on something that's moving regularly on that farm, and farms are just, the big farms there's always something moving. Hitch a ride, and then it images, and then it geolocates that plant. So it says, vine 6, row 7 has 73 grapes of this size, this color, this leaf density, this shoot length per plant, for every plant continuously. That was their vision. They asked me to join as an advisor, and then a month later they said, we'd like you to be the CEO. Now go raise money so you can pay us.
Yeah.
And to their credit, I mean, I was not a founder. They founded it. I joined as an advisor, CEO, and then we together, plus others, ended up raising about 14 million, and we sold it to Kubota Corporation, which is the third largest tractor manufacturer in the world. It's now the operating division of Kubota. We grew it. This story is similar to Robotics in that we Robotics, we had cities around the world we were servicing, but this company was of a different scale. We ended up, our first customer, it's kind of funny, this is serendipity in startup world, right? You're trying to get your first customer, you don't care who it is,
right?
Just pay us something,
right.
Anything,
right?
Just so we can claim. So somehow we got hooked up with a guy, and we were referred to this gentleman in the Finger Lakes of New York, where they grow grapes. He says, you need to go to this guy. He's got a baby vine farm where he would grow vines to a certain size, and then he would sell the vines to some vineyard somewhere. And he was a really nice guy. Seemed very thoughtful, older gentleman, and very casual. And we did for a year, and we would put our camera on a tractor, and it would roll along the row and inspect the baby vine and tell you if there's leaves on it, how many leaves, how big they were, their color, and all that. So we did this for about a year and a half, and he paid us a little bit of money. And that was our only customer when we first started out. But we were so happy to have one customer.
Right.
We didn't ask too many questions. And he was great. He was just a wonderful guy. So finally he said, guys, I like this. I know some people who might be interested in this. And we said, well, who would that be? He goes, Welch's grape juice company? Yeah, Welch's, geez.
Yeah.
Who do you know? He goes, well, I'm the chairman of the board.
Isn't it funny how life works like that?
Yeah.
So we ended up, they ended up becoming a great customer, but then we were emboldened to go to California, and we got one of our first customers was a company called Harlan Estates. And for those who are into wine, Harlan Estates is it's about $5,000 a bottle. So very, very super fancy, super premium. So we inspected Harlan Estates grapes. That led to another vineyard, another, and we ended up opening an office in Sonoma.
Okay.
If you know Duckhorn Vineyard, we were like right adjacent to Duckhorn Vineyard, and did pretty well. So we went from kind of juice grapes to wine grapes in California, and then we said, look, if we're doing grapes in Northern California, where else do they grow grapes? Well, France. So let's go to France. So I called a guy who, my previous company worked for a company called Vinci, huge big industrial firm in Europe, who was like their head of innovation. And I said, do you know anybody in France who can, has got entrepreneurial, who's willing to work for a low salary and, maybe some equity and be entrepreneurial on boots on the ground. And we found this guy, Jonathan Petard, and he was a special guy, and that guy was amazing. So he was like, Mark, I can do this and that. I don't know anything about wines, but I will find out. So we ended up getting customers like Moet, if you know your Moet Champagne, Mouton Cadet, and others. And we opened up an office in Bordeaux. Somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it, right?
You're like,
And so we ended up getting a bunch of decent traction in France. We ended up getting a French company that owns Remy cognac brand and all their brands. The sort of French holding company that owns them. It's this fabulously wealthy big firm that owns a bunch of stuff, kind of like a competitor to LVM in France. They invested a substantial amount in us because they own companies that serviced vineyards. That got us rolling. And then we thought, so we were deep into juice grapes, wine grapes. And somebody said, well, look, grapes are grapes. Why don't we do table grapes? So we ended up getting Sunview in Central Valley in California. And it's funny, this may sound like just a casual sort of thing to say, let's go do these different grapes. But in AI, which is what we used, it requires you to remodel and refigure. And so every time I would say, let's go do this, my colleagues would say, let's not. And then finally, I thought, well, grapes are sort of like blueberries, guys. No, and then there was, I remember, no, blueberries, no. But we had a grower, it's a company now called The Fruitist. It was then called Agrivision. You can buy their grapes anywhere, their blueberries anywhere. They were our first blueberry customer in Peru.
Okay.
So we ended up growing a bunch of blueberry. It actually made the company. We got a bunch of blueberry growers in Peru, Chile, set up an operation down in South America. Along the way, a big Japanese industrial firm called Kubota. People have probably seen their vehicles all over the place. Said, we like what you're doing. Would you be interested in us investing in you? And I thought, maybe. That comes with issues. I mean, I had told you about GE investing in one of my companies. The Robotics, BMW was an investor in Robotics. So when you get an industrial investor versus a straight up venture fund, it comes with conditions. Yes. So you're like, what you're going to, and they didn't have a lot of conditions.
Okay.
So when they invested, we went forward. One little side note to those out there who are starting your company and you're thinking of going overseas, and you face some challenges. So one of the ones I did not anticipate was, it's great. We've got customers in California and France, Chile, Peru, and ultimately Tunisia and Mexico. And this is fantastic. We got investors from Singapore and Japan and France and Germany and Brazil and the United States. We're like, wow, we're like global startup. And what you realize is there are major cultural differences between countries and how people think about business, how they communicate, how you interact, expectations. And I'm like, so that's why the UN is so crazy. And learning all that and managing that, I felt like an international diplomat half the time. It was really challenging to get all these parties to kind of understand what we're doing. It's a lot of airplane time. But the one thing that I came away with that I would say about it, well, it does come with a price. The world is different now. It used to be that if you went international when I was younger, it was like this glamorous thing that only giant industrial companies did, but otherwise stay at home, focus on North America. No longer. This world is flat, as they say. Here we are, this humble little Pittsburgh company, and we got operations in all these 4 continents and investors from as many continents.
Right.
And we're still in Pittsburgh. Funny story. Can I tell another funny story? Of course. So one of our customers was this guy named Bernard McGrez. And Bernard was, he's legendary globally as like, I think he's basically the only person in the world who made his billions from wine only. The big joke in California is if you want to make millions from the wine business, start as a billionaire. And there was a guy, Julian, who was his viticulturalist, kind of a plant scientist, who was at Mouton Cadet, and we'd been working with him in his previous company, and then he moved and started to work for Bernard McGrez. He calls me up and says, "Hey, Mark, I have a new job. I'm working for this guy, Bernard. I want you to come work for us. So, but you need to talk to Bernard." And he's very funny, Julian. He goes, "Julian, I know," he's like, "Mark, I know you are always making fun of me because I am from France. I am French. But let me tell you, Bernard is 10x French. So beware."
Yeah.
So I met with Bernard, and he was a piece of work. Guy's in his 80s, got mousse in his hair, shirt unbuttoned down to his belly. Comes in, he's like, "This is, I do not believe in this AI. This is ridiculous. You have 5 minutes, then leave." And I'm like, all right, this isn't going to go well.
Yeah.
And so I thought the only way I'm going to get this guy is I got to get this guy to laugh, and maybe there's hope.
Yeah.
And I said, "Bernard, I really appreciate the time. I know you've been growing grapes your whole career, and some of these vineyards you have are hundreds of years old. But let me tell you, we're from Pittsburgh, and we're going to tell you how to grow grapes better." And he looked at me like his mouth open.
Yeah.
And then he must have laughed for like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
He just thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. He laughed and laughed. And then finally he's like, "Okay." So he became a good customer. But so we built that up over 5 years, really from kind of a sort of a dead start. George and Tim had been doing some work before that, and built it up. And then one day I was, again, another funny story. I was in a vineyard in California, one of our big customers, and we were walking around the vineyard, and they're walking around the vineyard. And there's a group of executives from Japan, like a dozen or so of them. And they're all Japanese, and they were speaking Japanese to one another. And I'm walking with them, but they were speaking Japanese, and I hear Japanese, and Bloomfield. Japanese, Bloomfield. So for whatever reason, I'm following them, imagining that I'm going to translate Japanese on the fly or something.
Yeah.
So they reach a point where they get in the vineyard, and I don't think they can see me. And an American joins the group, an American executive, and he starts talking in English, and they speak to him in English. And now it's kind of revealed what they're thinking. They didn't know I was there. Mm-hmm. And then they sort of turn around, and I was behind the row. And as they turn around, I look down on the ground. "Oh, this is soil. That's the finest terroir in North California." So that was my first exposure. I thought, okay. And then they eventually just approached us. And when you get acquired, you get an LOI, you get a letter of intent, and it's got all the conditions, and the whole conversation starts. And they're a giant company, so a giant company brought a giant team to do due diligence on a little company. I think there were twice as many people doing due diligence on us as we had employees.
Yep.
And eventually, one thing led to another. We got to a place where we both liked it and said, "Let's go," and we did it. And now it's. And then that was about a little over a year ago. We closed the sale, and I hung around for a few months to try to help them with some things they were doing, and it was a great journey. And I getting restless. I couldn't wait to start another one, so I started another company. Can I talk about it?
Absolutely. We're really excited about that.
One thing go ahead, jump in. Yeah, no, I think it would be important for for viewers to understand is aspiring entrepreneurs, especially people who want to create something. Obviously, you need funding, right? it's the most important thing to bring your idea to life, or it's just an idea around the table if you don't have funding. So
Yeah.
I just want to hear a little bit about that process of how do you start that process as a creator, as an engineer, as a scientist, whatever you're trying to invent. Where do you go, especially in your first journey? Obviously, as you have multiple exits, I would imagine that becomes a little easier because you have a little bit more credibility.
Yeah.
But for the viewer out there that is maybe creating something and they have this great idea, but they need the funding to bring it to life.
Yeah.
How does that process kind of work?
Well, my experience, I think and I advise other companies, I've invested in companies, I sit on an advisory board of other startups, not just Pittsburgh, but in many other places in different industries. So what I see, and this is, I have to caveat, is this is my experience. It's not universal. It's not from a parchment on high about entrepreneurship. It's just kind of my experience. Usually it's in phases and what are called rounds and investment world and startup world. And the reason it's in phases or rounds is each phase of funding is designed to support a specific step in that process. So when you're building something, if the three of us decided to start a law firm, if we were lawyers, it doesn't require a lot of investment. We could just go to a coffee shop and start getting clients, and before you know it, we have a law firm. Yep. If you're building something like tech, which requires a substantial investment in time before you get a customer, that requires investment. So venturable businesses are different than service businesses, and it just frankly requires substantial upfront investment. If you can get 5 or 6 entrepreneurs or engineers to work for free for 2 years, that's great, but don't count on it. Right? Yeah. So you need that first bit, and the first bit is sometimes called the seed round. And in America, depending on where you are, whether it's New York or Pittsburgh or even Silicon Valley, it goes from anywhere from $250,000 to now, depending on the type of company, several $1 million. Now, and I'm sure there are people out there. Well, I know a guy did a $300 million seed round. Yeah, those are exceptional. Most startups, tech companies, unless you're in biomedical, which requires a much larger minimum scale. For the most part, your tech startup's going to be around 250 to a few million bucks. And people have a misconception about that first money. They think, well, I'm going to apply, I want to know after you've spent a year working on it and $1 million, what's your EBITDA and what's your, no. It's not a business. It's a project. Right. The seed round is a project in the hopes of becoming a business. And what I mean by business is, you're a business when you've crossed the threshold of, I am generating more money per month than it's costing me to generate that money. Cash flow positive, break even, whatever you want to call it. Until that time, it's just a really ambitious project. And the seed round really has a singular purpose, which is to generate enough evidence to support another investment in the next round. Now, that may sound counterintuitive. Wait, I'm raising money to spend money to raise more money. And the answer is yes. Yeah. So if I look at the old school Saturn V rocket that sent people to the moon, and people have seen pictures of that, where you would have stages, and those stages would get the rocket to a certain level, and then that would drop off, and then another part of the rocket would light up, and that would get it, and eventually they got escape velocity and they're circling the Earth. Well, that's how startups work. That seed round is that base level rocket engine that simply gets the other fuel moving. Got it. So the seed round is designed for you as an entrepreneur to collect data and evidence to go back to all the people you hope to ask for more money or new money, to say, I told you that this was true, and this was probably true, and this was probably true. And here's what I found. We developed this. We developed sometimes what's called a minimum viable product, right? The version of the product that doesn't quite work the way it ultimately will, but people can use it and touch it and feel it. And I've got a response. I've gotten people to use it. Here's what they said. And some are using it in this novel way. And so what you've told the investors in the prior to the next round, with that seed round, you've generated information that says, I told you, I said that there's gold in that mountain.
Yeah.
I did a little digging and I found this. I found these nuggets. So can you give me $10 million?
Right.
And that's how this game works.
How much equity are you usually giving up in each phase? Obviously, as little as
Great
possible,
question.
but-
Rule of thumb, again, rule of thumb. You know, some people, the rule of thumb I use is you want to keep dilution at around somewhere between 15 and 20% in every round. So this is where it gets a little confusing for people. And there's all kinds of misconceptions I think people have about this. You're creating a pie. And right when you start, it's you and your co-founders in a coffee shop, and you have what's called an air pie. The three of you own 100% of your company that's worth nothing.
Right.
That pie will ideally, through effort, grow. So the pie will get bigger. It'll start to have apparent value. And what will make it grow is effort and money that will be used to generate more effort. So if you just think of money as nothing more different than a person's labor, you're putting money in to generate effort. So really the value is created from effort, ultimately, not from just spending money. And so that effort creates perceived value. That perceived value will grow. But in order to get the fuel to allow that perceived value to grow, you have to give up part of your business. So your slice will get thinner because you're inviting strangers in to be participants in that pie. But you hope that the pie grows faster than your slice shrinks.
Yeah.
I would love to own 0.5% of Google.
Right.
I'd be perfectly okay with getting diluted down to 0.5% of Google because I'd still be a billionaire.
Right.
So the way to think of it is, how do I grow the value, not how much do I give up in my share? But generally speaking, you want to keep that slice at around 20%. Now, here's where things get a little weird. So I always tell my students, and I've learned this as well, that so how do you value something that's an air pie? You know, how do I just go to somebody and say, hey, give me money in the hopes that I might be able to prove something to you? Really, seriously? And the answer is yes. And how do you do that is partly through how compelling is your vision for what you're doing. Who are you to make this claim? Why do you think that way? And these are all subjective judgments that you and the investor are making. Now, if I want to own a piece of your company, I would need to know what percentage I'm going to get before I make that investment.
Right.
So how in the world are we going to value something that's still just a conversation and a subjective judgments? Well, that's where what's called a SAFE comes in. So for those who invested in businesses, there's two ways to invest. I can lend you money, which then that money I lent you converts to equity, or I can just own a piece of your money, what's called a priced round. I can either say, here's 500 grand and I now own 25% of your company because it was priced at 1.5. I add another 500K. Now it's worth 2 million the day after I give you the money.
Right.
So now I own 1/4 of your business. Not a good idea because usually you and I, the investor and the entrepreneur, are going to disagree about, and that's 1.5. No, it's 3.5.
Yeah.
And so why don't we just agree to disagree? Let's make this easier. Why don't I just lend you the money? And just like any lending, I get a little interest every year. And I don't want you to pay me back my money with interest. I want you to spend it, invest it to grow value. And then I want to own a piece. So let's suspend judgment about what it's worth until the next round. And let a more sophisticated investor come in later, tell you what the company's worth. We've done more work. You've spent my money, created more perceived value. And then I will take that money I lent you and convert on a per share basis what the new investor pays, plus a little discount, plus some of my interest. So that allows you and I, who disagree on the price of this company now, it allows me to invest, you to receive my capital, and us to work together and get to. But I do say this for people who are listening. When you get to the place of pricing around, people always say, I'm going to go into a negotiation and get as much of that company as I can. And the entrepreneurs say, I'm going into that negotiation, I'm going to give as little as I have to.
Right.
And the problem is there's an optimum price, not the price I got. So what I mean by that is, let's imagine you guys had done a seed round of $1 million. You did a great job, marvelous job creating value. And now I'm the A round investor. And you come to me and say, Mark, we want $1 million. Our company's worth 10 million. And I say, no, it isn't. No. I'll give you $1 million, but your company's worth it's worth 2 million. And maybe you guys have never done this before, and you get a little desperate, and it's like, oh my goodness, wow, that's so different. But it is $1 million, so this is awful. So let's do the deal. You created a problem. That's a bad move by the investor. It's a bad move. Because what's going to happen is those non-savvy entrepreneurs took a bad deal, but they still have the talent and credentials to go do this. Mm-hmm. And they're going to start talking to their friends. And their friends are going to say, what in the world were you thinking? Right. You gave away a third of your company. You're barely out of the chute. That's a terrible deal. And they're going to say, you're right, we quit. Now, what does the entrepreneur have? Some furniture, a few computers.
Yeah. Right.
Now flip it around. Now the entrepreneurs go in and say, we're worth 30 million. Give us $1 million. And the naive investor is saying, oh my goodness, geez, but I don't know. I've never done this before, but I had a friend that made a fortune and he sold Google. I mean, geez, I already sold his company to Google. That guy made all this money. My goodness, I want to be in this deal. Okay. Here's the problem for the entrepreneur. Bad idea. Because the entrepreneur has not only to sustain that valuation, they have to grow it.
Right.
So they took $1 million on something that was worth, they claimed 30 million. Right. Post money is 31 million. When they go to the next round, if they go to the next round and say we're worth 31 million, they're going to say you failed. You spent money and created no value.
Right, yeah.
Typically, you have to create multiples of that value. So now you have to go to the next round with this absurd valuation in the next round, and nobody's going to give you that.
And you won't come anymore.
And then you're going to have to do what's the inevitable, horrible down round, where you've lost value in the next round. And that, for an entrepreneur, that's a what I call a delayed death sentence. They'll invest in your startup, but you got a target on your back, and the first chance they can, they're going to get rid of you.
Yeah.
So there's an optimum price.
Where it leads you enough upside, but you're also getting enough value in exchange today.
Exactly. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't think that way. A lot of investors don't think that way. And when both groups are naive, it's trouble ahead. It's lawsuits and anger and bitterness.
Yeah. That's interesting. I don't think we've ever thought about it.
No, we haven't.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. I think we have time for just a little bit about the new company.
Yeah.
On that briefly.
Music. It's called Musing AI. It's still a little bit in stealth mode, although if I just said that out loud, it's obviously not in stealth. So the way to think of it is with AI, and it's just now, my world has been physical AI, where I look at stuff and guide, actions in the physical world. This is different. This is an issue where if you look at how young people are using ChatGPT, some of them are having conversations with the AI. Mm-hmm. I broke up with my girlfriend. I feel miserable. What should I do? That's a horrible reason to use ChatGPT, because ChatGPT wasn't built to do that. Right. It wasn't built to conduct a relationship with you. But it did point us to an idea of what if the AI could be organized to help you alleviate some of the challenges you face every day, particularly for people who are seniors, older folks like me, who face challenges of isolation. When you get older, guys, you'll find this out one day, years from now. As you get older, you have fewer friends, your family and your relatives move on, and now you're alone, and that's a challenge, living alone, being alone. That sense of isolation can take a toll on people, physical and otherwise. What if AI could not replace, change that, but mitigate some of the costs of that? So we created this Musing AI, where AI can interact with you as you and I are speaking, literally speaking, but understand you. The AI is not just treating you like some object in the world, like a Google search engine. It literally knows you. It's listening to you. It knows ever more about you, your preferences, your background, your interests, your strengths, your the things that you value, your view of the world, and then engages you in a dialogue that could be about anything and everything to help you co-create a story of your life, maybe help you write a book, maybe help you do things during the day. Hey, Mark, remember, says the muse, your grandson's birthday's coming up in 2 weeks, and last year you bought him this gift. Would you like me to search for something similar, or would you like me to consider a new gift, says the AI. So there'll be a day, and we're focused on the seniors. This game is called Musing AI, like Greek muse, like Greek, yes. But there'll be a day when you guys are older where each of you will have a muse, and that muse knows everything about you and is proactively acting in the world, doing things on your behalf, supporting you in every way, emotionally, psychologically, administratively, practically.
Yeah.
So that day is coming, and we'd like to get out ahead of that. So it's called Musing AI. So we're pretty excited about that.
How long have you been in that venture?
Well, we sold my last company a year ago, and I one of my grad students 5 years ago is a woman named Angela Chen. She was getting her PhD, which she's now finishing, in computer science at Carnegie Mellon. And she approached me in earlier the year, and she's like, hey, remember me? I was a student in your class when I started my doctorate. Well, now I started a company, and I'd like you to do CEO stuff, and I'll do the rest of it, and then let's start a company. So back in February, March, we started in earnest to work in this, and we've raised a little bit of money, have some employees, have some musers. We have musers.
Nice.
And we're off and running. So another journey. For those out there who are older entrepreneurs, I want to say to you, my last company I started when I was 60. The one before that I started when I was 55. So this one I'm starting at 66. So there's hope for all of you at an advanced stage to go out and start companies.
Awesome.
Incredible.
Well, you're, I think, our first guest and hopefully you would do this for us, but I'd love to have you back on. I feel like we just scratching the surface.
Yeah,
Definitely
yeah.
a part two.
Yeah, I think, yeah. So to all the listeners, look out for a part 2 with Mark if he'll be nice enough to come back.
Happy to do it.
This was, a pleasure just hearing your story and your success, and hopefully, to the viewers, the biggest piece that we always preach, and Mark is a living example of it, is just no matter what, don't quit, and you're never out for the count. Back in the South Side, that conversation you had, look what it turned into and led to. If you didn't make that pivot, it wouldn't have led to all this different success that come from it.
Could not agree more, guys. Never quit.
Absolutely. So follow all of this everywhere there's social media: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Look out for the episode because it's going to be a good one with Mark. Mark, thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you both.
Absolutely.
Good luck. Thank you.
Next time, stay disciplined.